A sharp scream sliced through the still air like glass shattering on concrete. Ava, a 35-year-old social worker with tired eyes and a tender presence, froze in place beside a dusty yard sale table. Her fingers had just raised the edge of an old shoebox filled with forgotten photographs. One photo, tucked deep inside, sent a jolt of panic through her chest. It was a candid snapshot of a man standing beside a woman and a child. The man's face was unmistakable. Ava said, That's my father. But he died before I was born." Her hands trembled as she flipped the photo over. An unfamiliar name was scrawled in red ink. Her mind flooded with confusion. Why was this image at a stranger's yard sale? And who were the others in the photo? A breeze kicked up, lifting a few other photographs into the air like brittle leaves. The yard around her seemed to vanish as she stared into the past, captured on glossy paper, unsure whether she was spiraling into madness or fate. Ava clutched the photograph like it was a lifeline. Her fingers pressed into the paper as if trying to squeeze the truth from its surface. Around her, the yard sale resumed its rhythm. Bargaining voices, the clink of old china, the thud of boxes being shifted. But Ava heard none of it. Her focus tunneled inward. She whispered, "Why would this be here? Who brought this?" She stood and scanned the tables, looking for someone, anyone who might know. A woman at the far end of the sale caught her eye, elderly, wiry, wearing dark sunglasses and a wool shawl despite the warmth. The woman looked at her, then turned away abruptly. Ava's heart skipped. Something told her this was not coincidence. She began moving toward the woman, holding the photograph forward like a question in physical form. The woman disappeared behind a stack of dusty furniture. Ava muttered, "Wait, please." But the woman was already gone. Chasing a ghost through the maze of second-hand relics, Ava pushed past a stack of old chairs and lamps. The woman had vanished into thin air. "Damn it," Ava said under her breath. She turned back toward the table, trying to remember every detail about the woman's face, her posture, her clothes. She was so specific, and yet now, so unreachable. Ava's phone buzzed in her pocket, startling her. She answered without checking. "Ava speaking." Her best friend Lena's voice came through. "Did you find anything?" Ava hesitated. "I found someone. A photo of my father. He's alive in it." Lena was silent for a long beat. Then, "Where are you?" Ava replied, "Oak Ridge, yard sale on Brighton Lane." Lena said, "You need to leave. Now." The words landed like a punch. "What? Why?" Ava asked, but Lena had already hung up. Ava stared at the phone screen, her heartbeat drumming louder than her thoughts. The photo still burned in Ava's hand as she left the yard sale. Her footsteps echoed on the cracked pavement, a rhythm out of sync with the quiet neighborhood. She glanced over her shoulder twice, unsure if someone was following her. The breeze had stiffened. The leaves no longer rustled, they scraped. Her car was parked half a block away, just beyond a crooked mailbox and a broken picket fence. As she approached, she noticed something odd. A folded envelope sat under her windshield wiper, slightly damp from dew. Ava plucked it free and opened it with numb fingers. Inside, another photograph. This one was even older, a grayscale image of a man in uniform standing beside a nondescript building. On the back, in the same red ink, "You were never supposed to see this." Her chest tightened. She looked around. No one in sight. Her world, already cracked, began to splinter. Inside her car, Ava locked the doors instinctively. The second photo lay on the passenger seat like a ticking bomb. She stared at it, then at her own reflection in the rear-view mirror, eyes puffy, skin pale, her breath fogging the glass slightly. Her phone buzzed again. Unknown number. She didn't answer. Another buzz. A message this time, "Stop looking. This doesn't concern you anymore." Her fingers clenched around the steering wheel. "The hell it doesn't," she muttered. She started the engine, the rumble grounding her spinning mind. Her eyes flicked to the side mirror. just a mailbox. And yet, she couldn't shake the feeling that the woman from the yard sale was still watching her from somewhere just out of view. The next morning, sunlight broke through the blinds of Ava's small apartment, casting long golden stripes across her worn kitchen table. She sat with both photographs laid out in front of her, her fingers tracing the edges again and again. An untouched cup of tea steamed beside her, slowly growing cold. Memories flickered. Her mother, long gone, always dodging questions about her father. Ava whispered, why would she lie? Who was he really? She pulled out an old journal, flipping to pages where she had once scribbled questions about her past, most of them unanswered. A knock at the door startled her. She opened it to find her elderly neighbor, Mrs. Tully, holding a small package. This was left on your doorstep, she said. Ava took it carefully. No sender. Inside, an old cassette tape and a note. If you want answers, listen. Ava's hands trembled as she stared at it. Something deeper had been set in motion. The cassette clicked into place in Ava's old tape player, with a sound both foreign and nostalgic. She pressed play, bracing herself. Static. Wow. Then, a voice, male, low, deliberate. If you're hearing this, I may already be gone. But I need you to know who I was. Ava sat frozen. The voice wasn't familiar, but it stirred something inside her, something ancestral. The man continued. My name was not the name you were told. I was involved in things. Things I regret. Things I had to hide. He paused. They erased everything. I had to let them. Ava's breath caught. The voice was measured, but laced with deep sorrow. I watched from a distance, always, and I never stopped loving you. Tears welled in her eyes. Ava clutched the table as the tape clicked to silence. She rewound it, played it again and again. Each time, the ache in her chest deepened. This was only the beginning. Ava took the cassette and photos to her bedroom, placing them beside a childhood keepsake box hidden under her bed. She sat cross-legged on the floor and opened the box slowly. Inside were worn-out drawings, trinkets, and a photo she hadn't looked at in years. It was her and her mother at the beach. She remembered how distant her mother had been that day, barely smiling. Ava said aloud, "You were always hiding something." In a flash of boldness, she opened her laptop and searched the name from the back of the photo. L. Hallstrom. Pages loaded. Government documents. Articles. One from 1984 featured a photo of the same man from her photograph. Headline: Whistleblower vanishes after exposing secret operation. Ava whispered, "Oh my God." Everything tilted. Her father hadn't died in an accident. He had disappeared. Erased. And now someone didn't want her to dig deeper. The room felt smaller now, the walls closer. Ava's mind spun. Who was L. Hallstrom? Was that his real name? She printed the article, grabbed the photos and cassette, and stuffed them into a folder. She needed help, someone she trusted. Without hesitation, she drove across town to Lena's apartment. Lena, a nurse and Ava's best friend since college, answered the door in scrubs. "You look like hell," she said. Ava replied, "I found something. I think my dad was part of something bigger. A cover-up. Maybe even a spy." Lena blinked. "Ava, that's a lot. Come inside." Ava laid out everything on the table. As Lena flipped through it, her face changed, less skeptical, more troubled. She said quietly, "You need to be careful. These aren't stories. This stuff gets people hurt." Ava asked, "How do you know that?" But Lena avoided her eyes. Ava paced Lena's living room as tension thickened the air. "Why are you acting like you've seen this before?" she asked. Lena stayed seated, her hands folded tightly in her lap. "Because I have," she said finally. Ava froze. "What?" Lena continued. "Years ago your mom showed me something. A photo. That same man. She made me promise not to tell you. Said it would only bring pain. Ava's voice cracked. So you knew? All this time? Lena stood up, her voice soft. I didn't want to hurt you. I thought it would fade. Ava stared at her. Her world was collapsing inward again. You lied to me. I protected you, Lena replied. The silence that followed was volcanic. Ava turned away, her mind already racing past the betrayal. If her mother had feared this truth, then whatever it was, it had to be dangerous. Ava sat alone in her car outside the city archives building, staring at the entrance like it was a portal to another life. The folder sat on the passenger seat, its contents now memorized. Inside were the photos, printed articles, and the mysterious red ink names. She took a deep breath, grabbed the folder, and stepped out. The clerk behind the desk was older, glasses sliding down his nose. I'm looking for anything on an L. Hallstrom, government records, military, political, anything, Ava said. He gave her a skeptical look, then led her to a microfilm station. Hours passed as she scanned reels in the dimly lit room. Her eyes burned from fatigue. But then, there it was. A declassified report. Project name, Midnight Chariot. Hallstrom's name was mentioned, once. Subject terminated. Memory protocol initiated. Ava's stomach flipped. Her father wasn't just erased, he was silenced. By the government. The words repeated in her head like a drum beat, subject terminated. Ava left the archives shaken, stepping into the parking lot just as the sun dipped below the skyline. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number again. She hesitated, then answered. A deep voice said, You're not safe. Who is this? She demanded. They know you're looking. Stop before they stop you. The line went dead. Ava's pulse spiked. She turned in a slow circle, no one around. But paranoia sank its teeth into her. She got into her car and checked her rearview mirror, again and again. As she drove away, headlights appeared behind her. The same car stayed close, 2 turns, then 3. Her hands gripped the wheel. When she suddenly pulled into a gas station, the trailing car passed and kept going. Ava exhaled, shaking. Someone had eyes on her, and she was now in too deep to stop. Back at home, Ava barely slept. Her apartment felt like it was watching her. She taped over her webcam. She unplugged her smart speaker. Every creak in the walls made her jump. At sunrise, she returned to the tape player. Maybe she'd missed something. She played the cassette again. This time she heard it, a barely audible click at the end. She rewound and isolated the final seconds. A voice, faint and distorted. Find the cabin. That was new. She scrambled for a notepad and jotted it down. Cabin. Where? She remembered a story her mother once told, about summers spent near Eagle Ridge Lake. Maybe it wasn't just nostalgia. She searched the location and found coordinates tied to an old ranger outpost, decommissioned decades ago. Her next move was clear. She packed the folder, her laptop, and a flashlight. If there were answers, they were in the woods. The drive to Eagle Ridge took 3 hours through winding roads and thickening trees. Ava pulled off at a gated trail, hiked 2 miles with only birds and wind for company. Her boots crunched dead leaves as the forest deepened. Then, she saw it. An old wooden cabin, half collapsed, tucked among towering pines. The door groaned as she pushed it open. Inside, dust, cobwebs, and silence. But in the corner, behind a loose floorboard, she found a small metal box. Inside, another cassette, a key, and a photo. The photo showed her father in front of this very cabin, arm around a man in military fatigues. On the back in red ink, "Trust no one, not even her." Ava stared, stunned. Her breath fogged the cold air. Her? Was it Lena? Her mother? Someone else? Every answer created 2 more questions. But one thing was certain, this went deeper than she ever imagined. Inside her car that night, parked off a lonely trailhead, Ava listened to the second cassette. This voice was different, sharper, clipped. If you've made it this far, they know. You've found what they buried. That photo? That man beside me? He wasn't just my partner. He was the one who turned. The tape crackled. They'll twist everything, even people close to you. If you think someone's been helping you, ask why. Ava sat back, chest heavy. The key from the box glinted under the dome light. On its tag, Vault 7, Harbor Station. She pulled up the location. It was an abandoned shipping facility. She'd never heard of it. Heart racing, Ava realized she was standing at the edge of a secret no one wanted revealed. The photo, the tapes, the lies, bunnies ponies. This wasn't just about her father anymore. It was about something vast and unfinished. Ava returned to the city, exhaustion clinging to her like smoke. She didn't go home. Instead, she drove straight to Lena's apartment, the photo from the cabin still burning in her hand. Lena answered the door quickly, concern in her eyes. You okay? Ava stepped inside without speaking and placed the photograph on the table. Do you recognize him? She asked. Lena blinked. That's your father. Ava stared. And the man beside him? Lena's hesitation was brief. Too brief. No idea. Ava narrowed her eyes. Don't lie. You said you only saw one photo before. Why do you know his face? Silence. Lena finally spoke, her voice low. Because he came to me 2 weeks ago. Ava's heart nearly stopped. What? Lena looked away. He said I had to steer you away from all this. Ava's voice trembled. You've been working against me? Lena whispered. I was trying to protect you. Ava stepped back, as if Lena's words had physically struck her. You lied to me, she said, voice brittle. Every step I took, you were right behind me, nudging me off the trail. Lena approached carefully. It wasn't like that. I didn't know what he was into. He said you'd get hurt. He said they'd come for you. Ava shook her head. You should have told me the truth. Lena's eyes glistened. You think I didn't want to? You think it was easy carrying that weight? Ava backed away, grabbing the folder of documents from Lena's table. You were the only person I trusted. Lena said softly. I still want to help you. Ava's eyes turned to steel. No, if you really cared, you'd never have hidden this. She walked out, the door slamming behind her. The silence that followed was louder than any scream. Ava drove aimlessly for hours, the city lights blurring through her windshield like smears of memory. She ended up at a riverside park where she and Lena used to walk in college. The bench was still there. She sat, hands trembling, breath rising in puffs into the cold night air. Her thoughts spiraled. If Lena had been compromised, who else was lying? She pulled out the Vault 7 key from her coat pocket. Harbor Station, she murmured. But if that key led to the truth, she'd have to go alone. No one could be trusted now. Her phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. She didn't answer. She threw the phone into the river. No more warnings, she whispered. I'm done being afraid. The cold wind whipped her hair across her face, but she didn't move. She just stared at the water, letting the past settle like silt in her chest. By morning, Ava was already at the industrial edge of the city. Harbor Station loomed ahead, an abandoned shipping yard, all rusted fences and forgotten containers. The gate was broken. She slipped through and followed the faint numbers painted on the buildings until she reached Vault 7. The key turned easily. Inside, a concrete room, no windows, no dust. It had been maintained. Files lined the walls. Most were blank or redacted, but one folder sat center on a table. It bore her father's name. Inside were surveillance photos, memos, and a letter signed by a name Ava recognized from the Project Midnight Chariot files. It described her father's attempt to flee, his warning about internal sabotage, and a single line, "The daughter is the liability. Watch her." Ava's hands clenched. She wasn't a side note. She was part of the operation. Her life had never been her own. She stepped out of the vault and into the cold air, the file clutched to her chest. Ava leaned against a container wall, heart pounding. The realization crashed over her. She wasn't just searching for her father's truth. She was part of the truth. A buried element in a game she never asked to play. She thought of Lena, her mother, the people who had shaped her with silence. Then she remembered something from the file, a contact name scribbled in the margins, Elias Rowe. No title. Just a city. Wilmont.io. She had one more lead. One more door to open. The wind kicked up dust around her as she walked toward her car, suddenly certain of one thing. This wouldn't end until she made it end. Her voice was no longer shaking when she said aloud, "If they wanted me to run, they should have made me forget." She slid the car key in. The fight wasn't over. The town of Wilmont was small, the kind of place where the past never left, it just got dusty. Ava arrived before noon, driving past faded storefronts and crooked mailboxes. She parked near a diner and pulled out the file with Elias Rowe's name. A clerk inside the town hall confirmed he still lived nearby, an old military consultant turned recluse. Ava made her way to a rundown farmhouse on the edge of a dried cornfield. She knocked, and the door creaked open before her fist hit wood again. An elderly man stood behind it, sharp eyes, thin frame, and a cane that looked more like a relic than a necessity. "You're his girl," Elias said. "Not a question. A verdict. He told me you might come." Ava stared at him, heart racing. "You knew my father?" Elias nodded slowly. "Knew him better than most. Come in. It's time you knew everything." Inside, the farmhouse was dim and filled with relics, old medals, maps, photographs, and books, stacked in leaning towers. Elias moved with deliberate grace, like a man who had lived too many lives. He motioned to a chair. Ava sat. "Your father was one of the last honest men in a corrupt machine," he began. "We worked on Midnight Chariot. When he saw what they planned to do, he tried to shut it down. They didn't take kindly to whistleblowers." Ava interrupted. "Why involve me? Why the photos?" Elias's face darkened. "Because you weren't supposed to be left behind. When he vanished, they thought the bloodline was clean. But you exist. That changes everything." He handed her a sealed envelope. "This is what he died to protect. Documents, names, the truth." Ava's fingers trembled. "What happens if I release it?" Elias said, "Everything burns. But maybe something new can rise from the ashes." Ava sat alone in a nearby motel room, envelope unopened on the nightstand. The TV played static in the background. The silence was oppressive. She'd been handed a nuclear truth, proof of a government operation that would shatter reputations, institutions, and lives. Her father's words echoed in her memory. "You were never supposed to see this." She thought of Lena, her mother, Elias. Each had carried pieces of a puzzle too dangerous to assemble. But now the image was whole, and the decision was hers. She opened the envelope. Inside, documents stamped classified, pages marked with bold headers, names, dates, and signatures. She could feel her hands sweating. There was no going back now. Her phone vibrated, unknown number. "This time," she answered. A voice said simply, "We know what you have." Ava stared out the window, voice calm. "Then you know I'm not afraid anymore." The next morning, Ava drove into the heart of the city with the sealed USB in her pocket. The documents had been scanned, protected, encrypted. She walked into a media outlet known for whistleblower stories, the Beacon Post. At the front desk, she asked for the editor by name. Security stopped her. She calmly handed over the flash drive with a note. "Anonymous source, time sensitive." As she turned to leave, her phone rang, this time, Lena. Ava hesitated, then answered. "Are you okay?" Lena asked. Ava replied, "I don't know what happens next, but I know I did the right thing." Lena was silent for a moment, then said softly, "I'm proud of you." For the first time in days, Ava smiled. It was small, but real. Mighty Rami. She didn't wait for the fallout. She just kept walking, the sound of her boots on marble echoing louder than fear. By nightfall, the headlines had changed. Whistleblower files leak. Midnight Chariot exposed. Ava watched from a cafe across the street, laptop open, her face lit by the screen. Her father's name was no longer a ghost. It was a story. A reckoning. Reports were flooding in. Protests. Investigations. The beginning of a storm. She closed the laptop and leaned back. The fight wasn't over, not even close. But the silence was broken, and her part in the shadow war was done. A soft chime rang as she stepped out onto the sidewalk. The city buzzed around her, alive with momentum. Ava took a breath of cold night air and looked skyward. For the first time, she wasn't just surviving. She was choosing. And that, finally, felt like power. She whispered, "Rest now, Dad. I finished what you started." Then, with her hands in her coat pockets, she disappeared into the city crowd. Ava returned to her apartment for the first time in days. The moment she stepped through the door, a strange quiet greeted her, not threatening, just still. Her plants needed watering, her voicemail was full, and the tape player sat exactly where she left it. She moved slowly, like someone entering a home after a long war. She sat on her couch, folder in lap, and stared out the window. The city looked different now. Or maybe she did. Her life before the photograph seemed unreal, paper thin and distant. Ava whispered, "I thought I was just looking for answers. Turns out I was looking for myself." On the coffee table, she laid out the final 3 items: the photograph, her father's cassette, and the now empty envelope. These things had once defined a mystery. Now they defined closure. She exhaled deeply, her shoulders relaxing for the first time in what felt like years. A few days later, Ava met Lena at the botanical gardens, neutral ground, full of color and silence. They walked without speaking at first, surrounded by arching trees and slow-blooming flowers. Finally, Ava broke the silence. "I'm not angry anymore," she said. Lena nodded. "I'm still sorry." They paused near a koi pond, watching the surface ripple. Ava continued, "You did what you thought was right. I just wish you'd trusted me to do the same." Lena glanced sideways. "Would you have stopped if I had warned you harder?" Ava smiled faintly. "Not a chance." The 2 women shared a quiet laugh. No hugs. No dramatic reconciliation. Just the start of a new kind of honesty. Lena said, "So what now?" Ava looked at the pond, voice soft but clear. "Now I figure out who I am without the secrets." The wind moved gently through the trees, as if nodding in agreement. Back in her apartment, Ava packed away the documents, not to forget, but to preserve. She labeled the box, Midnight Chariot, and placed it high in her closet, behind boxes of books and old photos. Some truths weren't meant to be relived daily, but they deserved to exist. She pulled out her journal next, the one she had filled with questions years ago. One by one she read them. What was his name? Why did he leave? Was I ever really loved? She wrote new answers beneath each, not just with facts, but with understanding. The act felt sacred, like rewriting history from the inside. When she finished, she set the pen down and whispered, "No more empty pages." For the first time, the past didn't feel like a puzzle. It felt like a story with a final chapter. And now, she was ready to start something entirely her own. Ava stood before a classroom chalkboard, adjusting a stack of books. It was her first day back teaching since everything unfolded. The students were loud, unaware of the weight she carried or the mountains she'd climbed. And that was exactly how she wanted it. She smiled, clearing her throat. "All right, let's talk about truth," she said. The chatter faded. What it is, what it costs, why it matters. The lesson wasn't in the textbook. It was in her voice, steady and clear. As she wrote the word, truth, on the board, she realized she wasn't just giving facts. She was offering something she had earned through fire. The classroom buzzed with curiosity, and for the first time Ava didn't feel like a person escaping her past. She felt like someone building a future. And that, she thought, was the most radical act of all. Later that evening, Ava returned to the yard sale street, Brighton Lane. The tables were gone, the crowd long dispersed. But the house was still there, quiet and ordinary. She walked slowly down the sidewalk until she reached the spot where she had first found the photograph. She stood still, letting the air wrap around her like memory. She didn't need answers anymore. Just this moment. She took a photo of the spot, not to remember the pain, but to remember the turning point. Then she turned away, sunlight at her back, and walked toward a life she would now shape on her own terms. No more watchers. No more lies. Just her, the road, and everything ahead. The final words of her father's tape echoed faintly in her mind. "You're stronger than they know." She smiled and whispered, "So was he." Ava stood at a quiet hilltop cemetery as gray clouds drifted across the sky. The grave in front of her had no name, just a small stone marked John Doe, 1986. She placed a fresh white flower at its base. "I don't know if this is really you," she whispered, "but it's the only place I could come." Her fingers grazed the cold marble as she knelt. "You tried to protect me. All these years, even in silence." Wind stirred the tall grass, and she closed her eyes. "You weren't just a shadow in a photograph. You were real, and you mattered. To me." The words were quiet but anchored. She stood slowly and stepped back. There were no tears this time. Just a full breath and a steady heart. Ava turned and walked away, not because she was letting go, but because she was moving forward. And he, wherever he was, would understand. Later that day, Ava visited her mother's grave, a more familiar sight, yet newly meaningful. "You kept so much from me," she said, placing a photo of her father beside the headstone. "But I think you were just as scared as I was. Maybe more." She knelt in the grass and ran her fingers across her mother's name, etched cleanly in stone. "I wish you'd told me more, but I'm starting to understand why you didn't." She smiled faintly. "You taught me to fight, even if I didn't know what for." A gust of wind tousled her hair. She stood again, dusting her hands on her jeans. "I'm not angry anymore. I just miss you." As she walked away, the photo fluttered slightly in the breeze, but stayed nestled against the stone. She didn't look back. She didn't need to. What she had now was stronger than memory. It was forgiveness. The next morning, Ava returned to her classroom. The hallway buzzed with quiet energy, students chattering, lockers clanking, the soft echo of footsteps. But something inside her had shifted. She wasn't dragging herself in anymore. She was arriving with purpose. As she set down her bag and opened her lesson plan, a student approached. "Miss Rahim, did you really used to work in child welfare?" Ava smiled. "Yeah, I've worn a few hats." The student nodded thoughtfully. "That's cool. You help people, huh?" Ava paused, then said, "Sometimes. But lately, I'm learning how to help myself too." The student grinned and returned to their seat. Ava took one last look around the room, then picked up a marker and wrote on the board, "Truth is the beginning of freedom." As the bell rang, she turned to the class. "Let's begin." That weekend, Ava sat in a bustling cafe, laptop open as she wrote. But it wasn't a report or a classified file. It was her story. Not for fame. Not for vengeance. Just to tell it. She typed the title, "What the Photograph Showed Me." Each word poured out of her like breath. The doubts. The danger. The betrayal. And the strange, beautiful strength she found beneath it all. Her hands moved quickly, with a rhythm that felt like freedom. Occasionally she paused to sip her coffee or watch the rain outside, but always returned to the keys. This wasn't about exposing the past anymore. It was about honoring it, transforming it. The photo that had once unraveled her life had now rebuilt it. One sentence at a time. She smiled to herself and typed, "This is how it ends. And how it begins." On a quiet Sunday morning, Ava walked along the shoreline of a lake, the same one from the photograph that had started everything. The air was cool, the sky a soft blue brushed with gold. She paused at the water's edge, slipped off her shoes, and stepped into the shallows. The cold stung, but in a refreshing way. She looked out across the water and whispered, "I'm still here. Not broken. Not hiding. Just whole." She pulled the original photograph from her coat pocket one last time, looked at the smiling faces, her father, the mystery, the past, and let it go. It fluttered down onto the lake's surface and slowly drifted out. She didn't chase it. She simply turned and walked back up the path, barefoot, light, and free. The journey had cost her everything she thought she knew, but it had given her everything she truly needed.